Hey, fellow freaksters, it's Tim from the Moratorium. Just here to remind you that if you enjoy what you hear, please like, share, and subscribe, then rinse and repeat. We're just a couple of small-town nerds trying to make sweet geek love to your ear holes, and we could use your support. Check out our website for movie reviews, links to social media, merch, movies, and more. You can find us at themoratorium.com. Now that that's out of the way, on with the shenanigans.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
And now for our lesson.
Welcome to an ultra special edition of the Moratorium interview series. I'm Tim Kornman, and with me as always is Jason Walker.
Hi,
Hey, are you happy I introduced you this time?
I am. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. This is the first interview you actually been on
Yes.
for the interview series, so I brought you along because I need backup.
Okay.
Because today we are sitting down with a prolific Hollywood director and editor, winner of many awards, including 2 Emmys and a Peabody, probably best known to our audience as the director of the cult classic Forbidden World. Give it up for Allan Holzman.
Thank you.
Hi. One of our favorite movies to cover on our podcast.
I want to do it again.
Yeah.
Well, I
let's just-
thought your coverage was hysterical. It was funnier than the movie.
like cult classic doesn't do it justice. It is one of our favorites.
I have to agree there. That before we get on to Forbidden World, I want to get the early Allan. Allan, what got you into filmmaking?
I was a math major, and I reached the point in my junior year where we were studying double integrals and time, and we were told that it didn't apply to life. And the MIT actually applied it about 12 years ago. Then I didn't want to teach because I stuttered. So stutterers don't stutter when they act. And I became a political activist in 65 with the Vietnam War. And so I started doing political theater and had starring roles.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't stutter
Wow.
when I was on stage. And that's known. That's a known fact of mine. You don't stutter when you sing, and usually don't stutter when you yell. And for a long time growing up, people used to really be pissed off at me because the only time I talked was when I could yell.
Right.
I was dubbed as the angry young man, or young
Yeah.
boy, whatever. But I enjoyed talking so much, I wanted to stay angry,
Right. Can't go
and
through
so,
life like that.
I also had an interest in philosophy, and I took this philosophy of aesthetics class, and it was a small seminar class, and I wanted to prove something that was right, because the whole semester it was always disproving theories. And for my thesis, I did a proposal for doing Dostoevsky's philosophy of aesthetics, and you had to accept one premise, which was you had to experience pain in order to create art, and they wouldn't accept it. And I didn't get beyond the first statement. And I went back and I packed up my bags and went to New York City to become an actor. And that's how it started. And then I got a scholarship ultimately to Bennington, which was then an all-girls school, and they needed male actors. And my job was the projectionist.
Okay.
And then I had equipment, and during the work terms, I stayed up there in the winters and summers and taught myself editing, sound editing too, audio tape editing. And I did subliminal editing, black and white leader to the Beatles' White Album. That was my first
Very
exercise. Took a couple months.
Yeah. Can you give us a taste of what your theater life was like?
Well, first I was trying to make it as an actor, and I was cute, and every guy in New York made a pass at me, and no women did. And just didn't add up. So I figured I better go back to school, and I only wanted to actually study theater and math, and there were only two schools in the country that did that, which were Sarah Lawrence and Bennington. And Sarah Lawrence actually was accepting me, but I needed a loan, of course, and they got my stuff mixed up. But I was acting at Williamstown Summer Theater, and I saw Bennington was offering that fellowship. And then when I went to New York to I discovered directing at Bennington, and I love theater of the absurd because it involves subtext and violence. And I think Artaud's theater of cruelty was the most intriguing. But I did Lorca, the House of Bernardo Alba, and Arrabal, the two executioners, and I acted in a Picasso play, and it was called Guernica. And then I went to New York, and because of my stuttering, I couldn't really convince anyone that I could direct. So I edited. I became a ghost editor and produced my own plays. Oh, Picasso had a different title for his play, which was based on the painting. And I played the Minotaur. Picasso's was Desire Caught by the Tail. Arabal's was Guernica. And I produced it at the Old Fat Black Pussycat Theater in New York in Greenwich Village, where Tennessee Williams did his plays.
That's pretty awesome.
And I brought in a jazz band from Harlem to do the bombings. And it took place in northern Spain. It was an old lady and an old man in the Basque region. And they had never even seen a plane, let alone been bombed, and they're separated. And the last night I didn't have a penny in my pocket, and I had to get a job cleaning the floors at the coffee shop. And you didn't actually clean it, you just rubbed the dirt into it. And then I got my $10 and I walked outside on Bleecker Street at 6 a.m. and said, I got to go to California to the movies.
All right. Now, when you got to California, when was this?
That was to go to AFI in 1973. I don't know if you know the director, John Avnet. He got some fame for Fried Green Tomatoes.
Okay.
But I recut his first movie in New York that starred Richard Gere in his first role, called Confusion Circle. And I was cutting in his loft. He wrote his next screenplay, and I advised him that he should go to film school. And then he applied to AFI and got in, and then called me and said I should come. And they'd actually hired stutterers in the 2 previous years. So they had a stuttering slot.
Interesting.
Wow.
That's slot, not slut.
Right. Very important distinction.
Your first credit on IMDb has you as doing the Life Achievement Award for editing for a tribute to James Cagney.
That was one of the best experiences I've ever had. I was accepted to AFI because I had editing skills. So there were only 10 directing fellows there, and maybe 2 had editing skills. The first year they honored John Ford. And although his movies are the best, they only played scenes. So the evening didn't have much momentum to it. And this was before, video editing was just starting. And we were actually being used at AFI to beta test their Sony editing equipment, starting with 1/2-inch reel-to-reel black and white being bumped up to 1-inch.
Okay.
And we edited on that. But this had to be done on film. And so I got 2 prints from every one of Cagney's movies, and I cut up one set of prints and then used the other set of prints to overcut so there wouldn't be any tape splices on the frame lines. And then it was projected interlock. And it was the first time that montages were used for an award show.
Very interesting. Yeah.
For TV, because they didn't have the budget. It would be way too expensive to hire people to do what I did. And the funny thing is, I was editing Candy Striped Nurses at the same time, and going to school. And
wow.
I didn't sleep much. I found that the perfect thing to stay awake was Jack in the Box fish sandwich and milkshake and coffee. I was convinced there was amphetamine in both.
Yeah, I
but
think
it
they
always
did
worked.
put amphetamines in them back then.
Yeah.
Anyway, Julie kept saying, "You have another job, don't you?" And I said, "No." And of course I did. And then we were at the mix for Candy Striped Nurses, and it was after the James Cagney thing aired. And she pressed me again, and I told her, "Yes, I did." But I said, "But they didn't pay me anything." And she said, "That gets me even angrier."
And you say this is Julie. Was this
Yeah.
Julie Corman?
Yeah, that was actually her first movie that she produced.
Okay.
I edited her first 2 movies. Yeah, the second one was Crazy Mama that Jonathan Demme directed.
Yes. Candy Striped Nurses, 1974. We're getting right into what is it, sexploitation era here.
Yeah, that was when Roger was doing his nurse movies and student teacher movies and women in prison movies.
Mm-hmm. How did you get on with Candy Striped Nurses then? I mean, did it just...
The other editing student or the other directing student who could edit was actually met Julie at a party and was offered the job. And she didn't want to do that, but she recommended me for the job. At that time, AFI, you mentioned Roger Corman, and people just didn't want to hear it for half a second. So I never told anyone what I was doing. And at Roger Corman's place, they didn't want to hear anything about film students. It's like they were
Right.
So I just shut my mouth and worked in both places.
Wow.
That's very smart of you. Right?
Yeah.
When you said you went straight into Crazy Mama, directed by Jonathan Demme, this is 1975. Cloris Leachman, Stuart Whitman, Jim Backus, Don Most. We just brought him up just
Southern,
recently.
don't forget her.
I'm sorry.
And Southern.
Yes, Ann Southern, Sally Kirkland. I mean, these are big names. Dick Miller.
Yeah, well, Dick Miller was in every one.
Right. It was just required.
Yeah.
Yes.
Always
I mean,
there.
It was what role will Dick have in this? You know?
Yeah.
He just loved it. He loved it.
He is great.
His first movie where Dick Miller plays the artist.
Oh yeah.
Roger's first movie. Blood.
Just know that.
It's
Bucket of Blood. Thank you.
Bucket of Blood.
Yeah, that's it.
So that has the best plot, which is, Dick Miller plays an artist who lives above the coffee shop, and there's all these beatnik artists talking about health food in the coffee shop and art, and they treat him like shit. And at night he goes up and he tries to be a sculptor. And he has the best line in film, I think, which is he's making the face and he says, "Come on, be a nose, be a nose." And, and there's a cat that's screeching in between the walls, and he takes that knife-like instrument that you cut clay with and just, threw it in the thing, and it stabbed, and you hear the cat shriek. And then he covers the cat in plaster and brings it to the coffee shop, and they say, "Ooh, you're an artist. This is fantastic. What's it called?" And he says, "Dead Cat."
So getting into this first real start into your editing career, I mean, was it paying just very little? Were you having
$350 a week?
Okay.
And then $450. So I did go up. And then when I edited Battle, I argued my way up to $650.
Oh, wow.
And that was for a 6-day week.
Yeah, it's a crazy amount of hours. But when you talk about, starving artists and trying to get your foot in the door and keep moving, like you said, going to school and trying to edit on the side and just trying to do as much as possible, not sleeping, is what it took to become what you are today, right?
Yes. Well, I always knew if I worked harder, I would stand a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as a stutterer, I felt normal while the world slept. That was the real key.
Oh, that's a good line.
And it's also, I read something the other day that if you have a lot of anxiety during the day, you tend to stay up at night because there's less anxiety. And
right.
You want to experience more of it.
Is that where you found less tension maybe in the editing room, staying up all night and just chopping away?
Well, no, there was always tension. But I started this as a kid because, as a stutterer, you always have some kind of trauma every day. And it's not like you fall apart, but you like berate yourself and hate yourself. And my one escape was watching movies late at night. And in the 50s, they always played World War II movies. And I think I've seen every Audie Murphy movie 10 times. I actually wanted to do a documentary about him. His life is just fascinating because he was a real war hero who then starred as a war hero, and he had PTSD. He was an alcoholic and suicidal and a mess.
Man.
Yeah.
You've actually gone and covered several of, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but several careers in your Art of Directing series. I think it's awesome. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been a one-person effort with that.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it still is. I'm still, because there's even AFI has no interest in it.
Really?
And I took it from, because they didn't do it. Even though I'm a graduate. But there are people who create media that I shouldn't get into politics.
Okay. We'll stay away from that.
I always lose.
Yeah, and we'll get into that too, how you butted heads with Corman too in certain things, and you didn't win there either, did you?
Well, I did. I mean, I consider it took a long time to feel like a win. I mean, I always, I was able to, carve my path there.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fight, but but that's what you have to do. You can't not expect to fight. Right. As a director, certainly, everything is a fight. It all depends how you fight. You can fight as someone who's nice, or someone who's mean, or someone who's a tyrant, or someone who treats people with respect. But it's always a fight. It depends on how you want to go to battle.
Yeah. Just going up your career, we're looking at Checkered Flag or Crash. It's a Joe Don Baker. We love Joe Don Baker.
Yeah.
He was a hit with Walking Tall then.
Oh yeah.
He was a big name, especially in Asia. I mean, the painting buildings just started for advertising then, and Asia was full of it. And there were so many just Joe Don Baker, 7 stories tall from Walking Tall.
Oh my God, I've got to find that picture. I'm looking for it right now. I must see it.
In the Philippines, in Manila.
Wow, that's
and everywhere he went, people go, Walking Tall.
I think they were just fascinated and a little frightened of him because he's a big dude.
Yeah, he could sing too. He was good. He was so nice. He was a gentle giant in that respect. But the film was so funny because it pitted him against 40 Filipinos. The director was from, I forget whether it was Australia. I think it was Australia, but it could have been New Zealand. He had the concept to shoot stop frame and to shoot 8 frames a second and then play it back with freezing every frame 3 times. And it just killed the action, and all the stunts, the main angle for the stunts was filmed that way.
Oh, man.
And it was really hard to keep momentum going. And I didn't use a lot of it. I had to, I didn't get along well with directors because as a stutterer, you really can't lie. You just don't have, it's just too big of a task. And telling the truth is better. You'll stutter during it, but it's easier. You don't have to deal with emotional stuff. You just go right out there and say it. And so, directors don't like that.
I want to ask you right now, what is your favorite director that you worked with?
Besides me?
Yes, you got to love yourself.
I mean, Robert Klaus didn't show up. So he was perhaps the easiest to work with.
That makes sense.
Jonathan Demme was the worst.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, he tried to fire me on the first day.
Really? Man.
Well, that happened on Candy Striped Nurses, too. Directors always blame the editor they didn't hire on their, whatever they screw up on the first day. The editor's not cutting it right. I mean, it's just standard. You go to expect that.
Yeah, you're the fall
but I was
guy.
hired. I was a director who gets hired by producers, and kind of the law of the land in low budget. You're either a director on your way up or your way down.
Mm-hmm.
So directors on their way down they usually are more They usually hate the film and don't want to do it. And, the quicker they're gone, the better. And, they're gone after the first cut, and they're not even in the room. They haven't been paid enough. So they're pretty pissed off and they don't want to spend that much time. So it's the young directors. And, but with low budget, you don't have time for the director in the room to give you feedback.
Mm-hmm.
The producer wants to see a cut 3 days after the last day of shooting.
Yeah.
So, and they don't want the director coming in at all. So then the director has 2 to 3 weeks, and that's where the difficulty comes. As an editor, you're trying to save the film from their work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You're the one that had his hands on it last, so you get the blame for some of it, I guess.
Well, that's kind of the key to filmmaking. You may not have total control, but you want to be there at the end just to keep trying,
Right.
Those who have total control make the best movies. There's no question about that. But, mostly because of the script and cast. There was a weird thing in the late 80s with audience response. That became a hip thing towards the end of the 80s. And that was a drag. It became really prevalent in the early 90s. And then
do you mean like screenings and getting like
when you got these people coming in who know how to ask questions of kids.
Right.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
So after Checkered Flag and or Crash, you've got The Amsterdam Kill.
Robert Mitchum. I had edited Checkered Flag or Crash in the Philippines.
Okay. Yes.
And so I had proven that I could cut a film. They got a moviola from Hong Kong, and I cut in the hotel, and I kept up with picture and did everything and brought it back to Warner Brothers. And Fred Weintraub was a big shot there because he had produced Woodstock and Enter the Dragon, and he had his own cottage, and I was cutting with the top editors at Warner Brothers. On my haul was
Awesome.
Marcia Lucas with Taxi Driver. She had cut the battle in Star Wars, and when I was cutting Battle Beyond the Stars, I modeled myself after her. But when she was cutting Taxi Driver, she had these 2 assistants who were huge, and she's really petite, and it was just darling to see them together like that. Oh, it was Bob Wolf was cutting all the President's Men. I was the first one with a flatbed, so they all came to my room to see how it worked. It was great. So I forgot what the question was. Got us here.
It was open.
With cutting in Asia. So when it came time to cut Amsterdam Kill, it was cut in England, Amsterdam, and Hong Kong, and I had to work with a different team of people in each place. I had proven myself there, and so I was I solved the Asian, the challenges. For that movie, I was cutting on a flatbed from Italy called an intercine machine. And that was not through the glass, but it was a projection system.
Interesting.
It operated like a gear shift, like a truck. And when you put it into play, it was like pushing it into first gear. And the lights would go out and you would project on the screen. And when you hit stop, the lights would come back on. And that's how you operate it.
All right.
When I was in Amsterdam, the editing room was next to a woman's prison, and I never got to go in. But it was in a shack that had slats, and grass grew through it. And,
you didn't bring up. You're like, guys, there's a woman's prison right here.
Talk.
We got another movie. I don't have to write the script.
I know. I wouldn't have asked that.
Uh-oh.
I've never been that relaxed, especially around guys. It just doesn't happen. So I don't know. Gotcha. I wouldn't ask. I would wait till someone to invite me, and then I'd go. Right. But I wouldn't. But I was really into working all the time, and I chain smoked Shermans then. It was like drank 13 cups of coffee a day, and had to drink coffee before I went to sleep. It's like
everything you can do to just keep yourself going.
But the guy who was my assistant was from England, and he referred to MOS as Muse.
Okay.
But Amsterdam was great. I loved being there. It was such an exciting city, and culturally it was a phenomenal place. And I got to see Patti Smith perform, and it was very exciting.
Wow.
Awesome.
I think I read a quote from, I don't know if it was Robert Mitchum or not, but he said that the reason he took on the role was so that, his wife could go on vacation with him. I was wondering why Robert Mitchum and Leslie Nielsen and how they got involved in a movie like that.
Andre Morgan, he had graduated college as a Chinese language major. Raymond Chow hired him to speak to the American and British crews. Most of the camera crew was brought in England at that time. They had two DPs, one who lit and one who operated, and they were both called DPs. And they were really excited to get a free trip to Asia and work.
Right.
And I was working with Derek Brown, who was the camera operator, who was Kubrick's operator, and Alan Hume, who was the lighting guy, I forget his credits, but he was a really well-respected DP. So it was a good crew, and people getting free trips to Asia. It was great because it was very expensive, really. And if you're there on a film, it's all set up for you. You get all kinds of great treatment.
Right.
But he was angry with the film because Bob Klaus promised that he would make changes in the script, and he didn't. And Bob Klaus was deaf in one ear. That was always his excuse. He didn't hear it.
I'm going to use that one.
Andre Morgan was a really ambitious guy, and he was the one who could speak English and Chinese, and so he made offers to these people. And so I'm sure they were, everyone was paid in cash then. So Andre on Fridays would be there and doling out cash to everyone. At that time, there was all kinds of foreign money being laundered for this, that, and the other. So it was heavy duty money laundering. That's how films got made. It's all with funny money. But I think it's Leslie Nielsen's last serious role.
Was it?
Because then he did Police Story after that.
1977.
He was a heavy in that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he did that. There were several movies that he was in where he was the bad guy.
Yeah, and Mitchum going through the greenhouse is a classic climax, with a tractor.
Yes.
Anyway.
So let's scoot on up to Battle Beyond the Stars, because we're going to spend some time on this for sure. How did you get involved with Battle Beyond the Stars?
Well, I had dropped out of film because I had gotten ripped off so much as a stuttering director, and roller skating, became hip. And I was already a roller skater because when I worked for Roger, the studio was in Venice, and I was in Santa Monica, and it was a 40-minute skate, and so I would go back and forth daily, and that's how I got my exercise.
I guess.
Yeah. I can't tell you how stupid I was for skating at night, in LA. But, that stupidity, I was just lucky that nothing happened. But I knew how to fall too, because you will trip. There will be, because surfaces aren't, even. And
right.
It's just give into the fall. If you give into the fall, you have a chance. You don't try to stop it. You just it's like sliding in baseball. I could slide in baseball really well.
Right.
So, anyway.
Well, there's something I heard about Allan. He could take a fall.
That's right. So that's right. Exactly. There you go. So I developed this movie. M was my favorite thriller, and so I, in the Brian De Palma, spirit, I took the plot of M and put it to roller skaters. And, where this one weird guy is raping the girls, and the roller skaters have to get together to stop the guy. Mm-hmm. Erwin Yablans was going to do it, and then he got other investors in, and then dropped me after stringing me on for a year because he wanted to change rape to drugs. And I was against it, but that was my way. I had a deal, and I hated what they did with it. And then he did Roller Boogie with Linda Blair. Mm-hmm. And so it was like I just dropped out of film and had to write a novel about my life to try to figure out the relationship between sex and stuttering.
Okay.
And around 234, I did. And then the construction job stopped and I wasn't skilled to go on. And I made the movie on Super 8 that I shot on roller skates, all on roller skates. So it really wasn't the movie, but it was the same theme of the movie. And I played the stuttering rapist on roller skates. But then, I had to get a job and I had to go back to film, but I really wanted a good movie.
Did you ever release that?
I showed it to all my film friends, and they just thought I was the weirdest person on earth.
Damn it.
I mean, what more do they want?
So do you still have that stash aside?
I still have it. I have it. I do have it. I almost showed it to you, but I just...
We're going to need to get our eyes on that eventually.
It's called Handheld. And made in 1980.
Handheld, okay.
I feel like rape on roller skates would either be like a no-brainer or the hardest thing that you've ever tried to do.
It was good. It was so easy doing a love scene on roller skates. It was cool, It was really good.
I can see it. Yeah, I could see that.
No, I can't. I need more.
But the actual rape scene was not on skates. But there is a love scene between the two people who have normal love in the movie on skates.
Right.
So I just read Hammett and saw that Coppola was producing Hammett with Wim Wenders directing, and Wim Wenders was one of my favorite directors. And Rudy Fair was the head of editing at Warner Brothers when I was editing there, and he was now head of editing for Coppola. So I had that connection and I wrote Roger a letter asking him to recommend me to Coppola, because I knew they were really close because they were neighbors for a really long time. And Roger always used his bathroom because Roger's girlfriend at the time took too long in the bathroom, and Roger was always late for work. So he had to use Coppola's bathroom.
Makes sense.
hey, you in there.
Plus, he's in the Godfather and all that stuff. So, anyway, I wrote to Roger, and Roger called me the next day and asked me to edit Battle. And he said that I haven't talked to Francis in a while, and I would feel awkward calling him to just talk about this. But I'm doing the biggest movie ever. I would love for you to the biggest movie I've ever produced, and I would love for you to edit it. Can you come in? And so. I said yes, and then I had a beard then, so I started shaving, and then I cut my neck, and I cut something that was like the blood was just oozing out, and I thought, oh, here's the ending to my movie. I kill myself.
Uh-huh.
And so I raced down to the garage, and I've been keeping this vertical broken mirror for a long time to use. And I put the mirror up and I filmed the blood rolling down, and I just, I was out of the shower, so I was naked, and it was like, there's the ending, and I die. And I got it in the can, and then I, looked around, and there was blood everywhere.
You're like, maybe I should seek help now.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little woozy.
I decided I have to go to the hospital, and so I got dressed, and I called a friend to ask her to call Roger to say I couldn't come there because I didn't want to stutter, and but she didn't do it. And by the time I left, the bleeding stopped, and I had time to go to the interview. And took the job.
But at this point, had you worked with Roger more than just editing for Candy Stripe Nurses? And
well, I had recut a couple movies for Roger. One was a Peter O'Toole movie. Roger, the way I, quote unquote, work with him is that on the first two movies with Julie producing, Roger saw every cut.
Okay.
And in a screening room, and he had a yellow pad, and he would write down all his notes, and it'd be very frustrating watching him do it because he would miss stuff on screen.
Mm-hmm.
But if he watched it 4 times, he would see everything.
Wow.
I always took his notes, and they were always good. They're always mostly about pace, not showing the really bad stuff, etc. But they're always like, he would often give notes to take 4 frames off the head of this and 4 frames off the tail of that, etc. and you can always take 4 frames off of something. So that was his go-to thing for just keep it going, make the movie shorter. So he would automatically do that whether the cut worked or not in some
Gotcha.
thing. But it always worked, and so I really learned a great deal about pace in a movie from him. But I grew up editing in commercials. That was my job in New York, so I would cut on commercials and then produce plays. So in commercials, it's all about pace. So, you take a dialogue bite and you're just trimming it all the time to make it sound perfect but fast. Because you always have to be ahead of the audience, So I built up that relationship with Roger because he really liked my editing.
Now, I want to talk about your book of Celluloid Wars, your time with Battle Beyond the Stars, because I found this to be very interesting read. I really enjoyed going through this and learning about it. When is that supposed to be coming out?
2 things that are delaying it right now. One, that I was recently introduced to the costume designer, and I had never met her on the film because the editors were never invited to the cast and crew parties. She kept her original drawings and behind-the-scenes Polaroids. Lots of, so much material. So we're adding that to the end, the last part of the book, and then I just. After the book was ready for publication, before the Skotek brothers granted me an interview, and they read the book, so they had all their behind the scenes models and everything that they did. So the book has just been embellished with all this graphic material and behind the scenes support. And then I've been waiting for Quentin Tarantino to give a forward, and it's really hard to reach him. I've been trying in many ways, but
I know I've been trying too. So
Quentin interviewed me right after I finished the movie, saying that he was wanting to write he was writing a film book, and he was interviewing directors that he really liked, and he just interviewed John Milius, and I was excited to be in his book, and he spent 8 hours with my wife and me on a Saturday asking us everything about how she did the score. And it was an electronic score, which was, as a full score, it was among the first. It was a delightful day, and I'd ran into him several years later, and we both had the same agent while he was trying to make it as an actor-writer, and he would always wear Mickey Mouse T-shirts. And I asked him what happened to the book, and he said, I was not writing a book. I was trying to learn about filmmaking. But he recorded it, so that interview does exist. He said it on his podcast at the New Beverly. He talked about those times and mentioned he had the John Milius interview transcribed, and so I'm sure he's got mine, and I would love to get a hold of it. But in his podcast, he named Forbidden World as his favorite Alien ripoff.
Awesome.
And then he also mentioned me as the big editor at New World for Roger for Battle. So I use that to promote the book.
Awesome.
But it's just really hard to get the king of Hollywood to
sit down for a minute.
So I'm not sure how long I can wait.
You got that? If you're listening, call me. So on Battle Beyond the Stars, though, reading all about the production and the struggles it took to make this movie is just fascinating. What was the scene like on the set? I mean, was it just a frantic battle?
It was madness. It was it was such the entire thing. I mean, the reason why I kept a journal was to keep track of everything. And I was tired of having movies that never went anywhere. Mm-hmm. So I really wanted to have a good movie. Plus, I had just written a novel, so I was used to writing. And it helped my speaking, because if I didn't have to worry about what I was going to say, I only had to worry about how I was going to say it. Mm-hmm. And keeping a nightly journal allowed me to work out how I would respond the next day to what happened.
Very smart.
And also keeping a journal, I was really influenced by 2 journals. One was the Caine Mutiny, which I loved as a kid. And, the ensign kept the journal of the madness and that helped him how to proceed. And it's funny because when I ran into Roger years later and I told him I had the book and I mentioned the Caine Mutiny, he said, I recall that Captain Queeg was off his rocker or something like that, or imbalanced. So I said, oh, no, it was really trying to find a way to determine the course of the film. And then the other one was Jean Cocteau's Diary of a Film, because he kept a diary of Beauty and the Beast. But I really wanted to communicate the art of B-movie editing. The original title was, from my point of view, editing the invisible art. And I really wanted people to understand how much effort went in to make something look normal.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That it was just as much as making the spectacular look great. The same kind of decisions, the same kind of, care and effort.
When the production was in full steam.
Well, the production was in full steam from the get-go because everyone was hired at the last minute. Well, Roger wanted to get into the theaters to beat Empire, or to be on the tail of Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And Empire came out in the spring. As it turned out, we made late August, but we made the summer. Was the difference between his keeping the studio or not?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that was the only chance for distribution, was to get the kids. It was constantly being delayed. So the shoot itself was, less than 6 weeks.
That's still crazy.
Crazy.
And on the set of Battle Beyond the Stars is where young James Cameron also showed up?
Yes, he went into the special effects department and was a model maker. And he soon got the reputation of taking longer than anyone else to make a model. But he and Gail Ann Hurd fell in love. And so she was always coming down to visit him.
Ah.
And she was the producer.
Gotcha.
Roger had 2 producers working for him. Gail Ann Hurd, who took care of the business, and Marianne Fisher, who took care of the production. And Roger had purchased the lumber yard called Hammond Lumber, and that's what the studio was. It wasn't entirely soundproof, let's put it that way. And they did have a swing stage, which was not soundproofed at all. So, but it was a lumber yard, and Roger kept the sign Hammond Lumber up there that was actually, broken, and he thought that people wouldn't think anything valuable was inside. And the parking lot was always hysterical because there was all these old cars that were dusty and dirty parked in the lot. That was the people working on the film. And but Jim is in the book in chapter 3.
Mm-hmm.
Kubrick had just done front screen projection, 2001, and that was more realistic than rear screen. Mm-hmm. And the way it worked was that it was a special screen, and the light from the projector onto the screen didn't have to really be that bright because the screen had all these prisms where they would point the light right back into the camera lens. So you couldn't really appreciate it live, but if you looked through the lens, you could see it. And so that way you could light the actors and you wouldn't see the projection on. So the planet came out dark. And so I called Roger, or I talked to Marianne. She said, Roger doesn't ever want to be interrupted during dinner. And I said, it has to, because they're striking the set and, they have to reshoot. Mm-hmm. And, because I was working late and I walked across, to about 7 or 8, and I was walking across the main stage and there was only one person there slumped over on a table, an A-frame table, looking depressed. And so I walked over to him and I said, are you okay? And he had designed the front screen projection. And I saw the paintings and I thought they were fantastic and just amazing. There were 3 of them. And he spent like 2 weeks doing them. And so then I told Roger about it, and he said, Alan, I never reshoot, just make it work. And he said, and we've already struck the set, and forget about it. And so I said, well, you should hire this guy, to do a set. And that was Jim. And he hired him to do the Cayman set, which had Nenelia hanging from the pipes, and Roger gave Jim $12 And he was brilliant. He came back with carnation milk crates, which served as the floor, so you could put steam through it, and egg crates that you could have as the texture for the walls. And when I did Mutant, we added lunchboxes.
Yes. Which you can, we did kind of pause a couple of times like, yep, that's exactly what that is. Someone had some carry out.
And you could paint them all different colors.
I don't think I would have noticed if I hadn't been told that. It just looked like a corridor in a
Right. And it worked.
And it worked.
Well, also, Jim at that time got hired to direct Piranha 2.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to Italy to shoot that, and that he had a horrible time with the producers on that. And he kept coming back to shoot inserts for his film. But just prior to that, he got the job art directing Galaxy of Terror. So he did the sets.
Mm-hmm.
So it was on his set that I got the break for Mutant Forbidden World. But that's jumping a little bit ahead.
While working at the lumberyard where the New World Studios is, you in the book described how difficult it was, even with the power issues, flooding issues, and was it just a disaster? Before
I moved onto the lot, Roger put us into the special effects office, which was this building in Santa Monica, just a couple blocks from the beach. The editor of Humanoids from the Deep, Mark Goldblatt, was doing his final edits on that, and I was cutting Battle in the same space, and nothing separated us, and we were faced in opposite directions, but we were side by side. Mm-hmm. And whenever we hit the brake on the moviola at the same time, the power would go.
Oh.
And Humanoids from the Deep, Roger declared it his worst movie ever, and they were making cuts every 8 to 11 frames. So Mark was always hitting the machine. As it turned out, when Humanoids was released, it became his most profitable movie of all time.
Love that movie, by the way. Love it.
So then Roger said, when it blew for the third time while he was there watching what I had cut the previous day, he said, I'm moving you to the main stage. And he had some profanities wrapped around that. And when I moved there, they wanted to put me in a small room behind the costume room.
Mm-hmm.
They had a flood in there, so it was still damp and mildewed, and it was no windows. And I said, I will not do this. And I had to say, you can fire me. I'm not moving in. And I had a standoff with Roger through Marianne. And then they built an editing room above the construction area on the lot. And I saw the design, and Roger had the room separated into 4 cubicles with doors.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you can't fit all the equipment in any of the one rooms, and it's too claustrophobic. And you have too much to do. It was in those days, an editor cut ideally with 2 moviolas, and you had an assistant with a moviola. Plus, you had a table and with a synchronizer and squat box and splicer. And then you also had a code, and coding had ink on it, and it smelled. And, you needed some space. And so I went in and I left the main separate, divider, but cut it into 2/3 so that it was a used space. I didn't cut it, but I asked the construction people to do it.
Right.
And it was a great space with windows and everything. I loved it. And then Roger came in to see it, and he said, who tore down my walls? And the construction people, thinking they were helping me, they said, I don't know, some editor guy. And of course, who else was it going to be? The one who argued that it was too small.
Yeah.
Were you completely under the bus?
He had a red Ferrari then, and he burnt rubber in the parking lot. That's
jeez.
But editing on like Battle Beyond the Stars and stuff, Roger had his own. Like, did he have a playbook? This is Roger Corman's playbook. This is how it's going to be when it this amount of action, this amount of nudity, this amount of, let's not mix comedy into it.
Well, there was no nudity in Battle. There was,
Right,
the outrageous costume with for Saint Edmund, with
Almost nudity.
cleavage galore, and she was really great. But it was for kids. It was definitely for the Star Wars audience, and so it was definitely a fantasy level, not a hard R-rated. He was PG all the way.
So, but for the Roger Corman playbook of where he says we do not reshoot. I mean, is that his stance on everything? Is no, we've got to keep moving forward. We've got to make deadlines.
Yes, he doesn't ever go over budget unless he decides to do it because he wants something.
Mm-hmm.
And he applies the same rule to himself. His last few movies, he went for the art world and film or to make good movies, and they didn't make money. So when he started his studio, and I worked with him in the very beginning time, you could never convince him to spend more money. And in fact, at every single plateau, when you think you've achieved something, he took something away.
Yeah.
In Battle, as soon as we got the first cut, he took away the water bottle. And I had to tell him that it took us so much time to go to the main stage to get water and back. He was losing time editing, and then he put it back.
Wow. But did he do the same thing as in taking away your help as well?
Absolutely. He made his system work, and it was, designed not to have a good movie. It was designed to give people enough so that they'd be satisfied.
Gotcha.
And keep it moving. Like, you don't plan to stay in town for more than 2 to 3 weeks. Then you move the same 300 prints around the country. I mean, you're only shooting a few weeks on these things. So Battle was way over his production head. It was like he had no idea what he was getting into with special effects because it had transformed. It was competing with Star Wars. Mm-hmm. So you had to do computerized effects. And there was an Elecon machine that never worked, and that was a computer, crane that could repeat the same movement. So you could do star fields and ship buys, and you had to make several passes on the same piece of negative. This was before digital, so everything had to be on film. And for some of the laser stuff, we didn't have time to actually craft lasers. We invented something called the garbage mat, which was someone drew the lasers by hand on black, and you would scrape it off. And that's how you just do it, just a few frames. You need some movement of light, and you got it. And to do backgrounds, you could mat out your outline by hand. So there were a lot of people working in rotoscope, but everyone there was working for the chance to get a job. There weren't that many films being made, and especially in special effects. It was all new, and Lucas had established this thing with sound. So suddenly more attention was paid to the audio as well. It was a very exciting time, but everything was being done to defeat itself because I had problems that, it was a given that if you were head of special effects, part of your job was to go over budget and get more time. Mm-hmm. And it just the way it was designed, in terms of what you asked about the Roger formula, he hired John Sayles to write the script. So he totally had the formula, and he established it with Corman. He was a fantastic writer for him.
He also wrote Piranha in 78, right?
Yeah.
Alligator, and he also wrote the screenplay for The Howling, so very interesting, yeah.
Towards the end of the editing on Battle, I saw Roger walking in the parking lot really dejected, and I asked him what was wrong. It seemed to be my role in life. And he said that they can't make the theaters in time. And I said, yes, you can. Just give the film over to me and I can do it. And they had generated enough flybys, and you can do a choreographed display of laser beams, which doesn't cost much money. And with all the different flybys, you pull character shots from all the ships, and you can stage several kamikaze type runs at the big ship and create the battle scenes through editing. And so he gave me the chance to do that. I could use his name for anything. I took charge, and met the two deadlines with the two battles, and each time he stood up and applauded me in the editing room.
Awesome.
It was fantastic. And then I said, can I direct? You know, the first time I asked him if I could direct, I couldn't get the word direct out. That was after Crazy Mama.
Mm-hmm.
So he asked me 8 times to edit Galaxy of Terror, and I kept saying, I've done everything I could for you as an editor. I deserve a shot to direct.
Mm-hmm.
And then he finally said, can you stutter and direct? And I said, I stutter less when I'm directing because I'm in charge, but I still stutter, but it's in the act of communicating, which is more than most directors do. And he said, you have a point there, Alan. I'm going to put you through the Royal Performance School of filmmaking. So that meant that I would do second unit. And I called him every Friday to see if there was work. And, you know, I would sit down at 2:00 with a bottle of wine, and I would call him and wait for him to call me back. And by the time he called me back, I was drunk. And he and you don't stutter when you're drunk. So all I had to do was say, hi, Roger, you got anything for me? And he'd say, no. And I say, okay. But I couldn't stutter.
Yeah.
He had the idea to, and this was based on what happened with Joe Dante and Alan Arkush's movie, Hollywood Boulevard, that was taken from all the different stunts from their girl movies, from the nurse and teacher and prison movies, because they had Candace Rielson starred in most of them. And so they structured it around her coming to Hollywood to be a stunt woman. And they used all the action from previous movies. So Roger put all of his car stuff together and created a new, hired Chuck Griffith, who did Bucket of Blood. And my job was to take people from the talking to the crash without crashing anything.
Okay.
And I had to talk on a walkie-talkie with the stunt guys, the car drivers. And there's nothing worse than sticking a stuttering director with a walkie-talkie. But luckily, I was a skater, so I skated from camera to car. And they loved being talked to by the director, and not ordered things on a walkie-talkie, you know. So my first day, you know, I said, get closer, closer, closer. And then they crashed the car. And like, I'm not supposed to crash the car. And they stayed up all night and fixed it. So it was a great, you know, I generated lots of stuff, and then I cut all the stuff all the action scenes for the movie. And then he gave me 2 scenes to do from a Kung Fu movie that Sergio Santiago directed, who was Roger's, who's from the Philippines. And he gave Roger a steady stream of Kung Fu movies or war movies and that sort of thing. But Roger wanted, it was with a female Kung Fu, Julian Kessner. And he wanted it to be accessible to an American audience. So he wanted me to do the trailer using a lot of the 2 extra scenes that I did, plus recut the movie as well as put my scenes in. So I came up with the idea for a chase scene and a love scene. And for the chase scene, I had her being attacked by 2 guys, and she runs into the lumberyard. And so every time they had a skirmish, she lost 1 article of clothing. On Candy Stripe Nurses, one of the plots, and Roger always had 3 plots, because as soon as one got boring, you could cut to the other one. And if you had 3, you could use an unpredictable pattern. And one of the plots was a candy striper trying to help the rock star Owen Bowles get it up. And so she succeeds at the end of the movie, and he has these 2 go-go dancers with him the whole time. And so he makes love to her and the 2 go-go dancers, only he doesn't take off his pants. And it was shot in one long shot, handheld, and Roger hates when you don't have coverage. In those days, you couldn't jump cut. It was against the law. You just couldn't do it. It was unprofessional. And so he called the director back in, whose name was also Alan, on the last meeting, and he said, Alan, I don't know where you plan to go to from here or what you plan to do, but I want you to remember one thing. When a man fucks, he takes his pants off.
Oh, wait, I'm taking notes here.
Let me get that
Take
down.
pants off.
So,
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I wrote this love scene where the kung fu woman takes off the guy's pants with kung fu knives.
now
And
we're
he
good.
said, Alan, that's just genius. Just genius.
Yes.
So I did the two scenes, and I swear we showed them on Hollywood Boulevard on a Friday night, the night that the film opened. And, it was definitely for the exploitation crowd. And the both scenes got standing ovations. It was just amazing.
Wow.
And I was really seduced by the idea that I could really bring theater to film. I could create enough buzz in the audience and keep up the energy so that it became, you didn't really.
Did we lose you?
I think so, Timmy. I'm still here.
Oh.
Okay,
No, you can't hear me.
I can hear you.
I can
You
hear
can hear
you.
me? Hey, there you
still
are.
Hear me?
I can now.
Oh. So, you remember where it was?
No. Jason, what do you got? Read back the notes.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. So I was. This was like the most profound thing for me, discovering the theatricality of what I could do. And so, then Roger comes to me, and the weirdest thing, you'll love this. So, roller skating was reaching kind of a feverish pitch in Hollywood, and they had these roller skating rinks,
Okay. Yeah.
And the one in West Hollywood, which is the biggest one, was having reggae night. And I thought, wow, I got to.
Oh,
Are you still there?
we lost him again.
I'm going to have to call him. Well, fellow freaksters, this was when we lost our VoIP call and had to resort to the backup recorder. We apologize in advance for the quality change. Thank you and enjoy.
Okay, so I heard about reggae night in West Hollywood, and I skated there from Venice, which took about an hour and 45 minutes. And it was right next to Barney's Beanery. Of course, they didn't have any skating on that reggae night. It was just a reggae band with the audience. And so I didn't bring a change of shoes. I didn't bring my shoes because I wanted to go as light as I could. And so I was stuck in the medium outside Barney's Beanery wondering what I should do because I didn't really want to skate back right away. And someone actually came up to me and kung fu'd me in the back. What? Yeah. And ran off after editing a kung fu movie. It's just really absurd. And then I go to work the next day, and Roger comes to me, and I'm like, I can't wait to go home to rest for my back. And he says, "You want to direct a whole movie, don't you, Alan?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, come around the block with me." And he told me that, Jim Cameron had designed the spaceship set for Galaxy, and it was available for one day because they were shooting Monday through Friday, doing second unit on Saturday, and then Monday was a redress with a burnt set. So they had the set for one day on Sunday, and if I could write and direct an opening of a space movie that could go anywhere, he'd give me a whole movie.
Oh, wow.
He would just invent a movie, and this guy named Oliveira came into his office with a robot suit and said he would offer it for free in a movie. So he gave me a robot and an astronaut, and he said, "If you need any inspiration, I've always wanted to do a version of Lawrence of Arabia in space." So I said David Lean was my favorite director, and he said, "Well, then you should have no problem at all." Right. And so I had 4 days to write, produce, and direct.
Wow.
And,
My God.
I did an opening of the space movie that can't go anywhere. So
Was that the opening for Forbidden World?
that was the opening for Lawrence of Arabia in space. It could go anywhere. He got his assignment, and he was to go to Exarbia. That's all I got from Lawrence of Arabia. Because after I gave several treatments, he said, "I want to rip off Alien." And he had this writer from NYU who he really liked. And he said, "You'll thank me for it later." And hired him to write it. And I said, "Well, I depend on you on my weekly salary. I can't just wait." So we know the idea of the movie. We know we're going to have to create a monster. We know we have a space station. Let's build it all. while the script's being written. So that's what happened.
All right.
And the big issue was how to kill it. And another big issue was, we were into not having a big monster. We were into having the perfect human or the perfect, human plant thing. And Roger hated that idea. He just wanted something big. And, it's really tough to make something big and move with no money. Our budget was $50,000, period. And we had 4 weeks to shoot with everything in camera. There was no special effects later. We didn't have a budget for post other than editing. So whatever was shot was there. It was like when we did the mutant on the mountain side with the cocoon. The mutant was supposed to come out of that, but it caught fire. And Roger George, who was the private technician guy, leaped out from behind and said, "Keep rolling, keep rolling." And so I had the crew broke for lunch. I had to come up with a story for why it's actually back at the station.
I mean, we just watched that not too long ago, and I don't think I had a question about that. I think I was like, okay, yep.
It worked.
Moving right along.
The worst thing, we had one day to shoot that whole scene, not the scene, the scene where how they get bitten, and that was done at a different time outside the studio. That was actually shot in Venice in the parking lot.
Oh, wow.
But we had one day to shoot all the exterior, stuff, and the costume designer forgot the costume.
No.
And it was an hour and 15 minutes outside the city. So we had to wait 2.5 hours for it to come back. So I was compromised on time for that as well.
You had one job.
Bring the clothes with you. Did you bring the clothes?
We had a whole outfit with a painter's mask and a scarf. That was it. And like you mentioned, Cameron's aliens. There were about I counted 8 or I can't remember now, but 8 or 9 different things that he took from Forbidden World. The biggest thing was the cameras that they all wore. We just had I had was just a little plastic box with some tape on it that was on the shoulder. He put on the helmet, but it was a way to get Tracy to see what was going on outside.
Yeah,
and for a camera to be everywhere. Oh, and I love the way we did the monitors set up, because we didn't have video playback then. It was all done with projectors, and they couldn't make noise. So we had 2 projectors that were, embattled for sound, and then the rest were stills. And I figured with 9 screens, if 2 were moving, the rest, you wouldn't be able to look at the rest as long as 2 were moving. So it looked like different monitor things. That's how we did that.
So we have a ton of questions for you before Forbidden World. And I think top on my list is, can you describe Fox Harris?
No, that was so great. I was just in awe of him. It was like, let him live. Let him take you wherever you can go. And he's always to go. He was fantastic. Coughed throughout the whole movie, smoked, chain smoke, put blood on your thing. He and Jim Chadwick were like the complete opposites. She did everything perfectly every time, how many takes. And Fox did something different every single time.
Did you actually know him before he was working on the...
No. He was a really hip actor because he was in
Repo Man.
Repo Man.
Yeah.
I love him from that. It's like,
yes.
I've got another big question for you here, because when did you meet your wife? Did you meet her while working on Battle Beyond the Stars?
No. We were together for a while by that time.
Okay.
I met her in 1977 at a party. We were supposed to meet 2 weeks before at the small wedding party where the bride and groom wanted to fix us up, but she never showed. And so I went to their wedding party. And as usual for parties, I would go late to everything, no matter what, because then you didn't have to introduce yourself. And then I saw her immediately, and so I had 4 drinks and went over. And
a little liquid courage.
And I overheard her saying that she was looking for a flute player because she was doing music for a play at Santa Monica College. So she played 4 songs that night, piano vocal.
Oh, wow.
I was just blown away. I asked if she could be my tax deduction, and I produced her music.
But her score in Forbidden World is just it's perfect. It's the total embodiment of the 80s. It just fits so well. I wanted to ask because when you guys met, because I know that you've weaved her in and out of your filmography here, but actually on IMDb, if you look at her bio, it says you guys are divorced.
What?
If you look at yours, it says you have 2 children.
No.
I was like, oh.
I don't think either of us ever looked at her IMDb. I'm serious. I have to take care of that. Thank you.
Yeah. So Forbidden World is a huge endeavor to take on, because this is the pinnacle of cult classic sci-fi horror flicks. It just really, really worked. And working with these name actors too. Jesse Vent, I know you wrote about him a little bit in your book, which we'll cover a little bit too, but how different it was to work with every actor within this, but bring them all together in this project. It just was kismet.
The strategy of the movie, that chart, I learned from theater about subtext and having to chart a film. I did that with theater, that you make a page where you have every scene on it with boxes to show what's action and special effects and, generally how to pace something. And I gave the mutant who grows up, going through puberty really fast. And I was always interested in the point of view and having him look through grates and slime and everything. So it's always a challenge in low budget to go from sex to action. But I regarded it as just, visual opportunity. And I think that the first idea I had for the whole movie was the laser shower. And that was it, right from Born to Rape, because I thought that would be the most beautiful thing I could do. And the whole point of directing a movie is to create movement. I mean, you have to get the performances, and it has to be the story, you have to go to things, but where do you create the movement? And that's the challenge. And so you do that first shot of the day and first shot after lunch. And then you race to make up for all your spoiled moving shots if you try to get those in. And you only have so much time. Luckily, it was a first-time cameraman. He was from Baltimore as well. And he had a fantastic crew, and they were just devoted to the movie. Mostly because I think how prepared I was. That Roger, one advice he gave me, which I totally followed. Another advice, which I didn't, but advice that I did, he said, as soon as you have a take that you like, and you're only allowed 3 takes with him, and you announce the next shot where the camera's going to be and what it's going to be.
Okay.
Don't ask the cameraman what he thought. He said, if there's anything wrong, he's going to let you know. So I always did that. It always makes the crew feel really, cared for. They know what they're doing. I was really big on setups. Because the more setups you have, the more freedom you have editing. And so, like the day for the Kabu scene, which it was one article of clothing, I had 94 setups in the night. And I beat Roger's record of 87. Gosh. I think a good idea I had for the set was, we built all the stuff for the control room, and I wanted lights and mirrors, and the mirrors would double the lights and make it more interesting. But that was the result of having a set for the lab where all the lights were visible and used as structure for as a set piece. And then I thought if you take all the lights out and then make the set black and cut holes in the set without changing the set, then you have a computer room. So we were able to use the same set for both. The thing that hung everybody up a lot were my overhead shots. And that really took a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
It was always a good challenge. And the hallways with slime got really dangerous. So you weren't allowed that many takes. And the way we kept focus, because we didn't have the lighting wasn't that strong, was when Tracy's running down the hallway, we had her tied to the dolly with a rope. And so when the rope was taut, we were in focus.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned in your review, how does she go around the thing to come back? And I know that was the only place you could run to. There's only one hallway.
Yeah.
And there, when I jump cut there, that was like a dare. I broke the rule, but I was able to do it because it was within the same shot, and there was so much movement and screaming. That was really my goal.
Now, on about this screaming though, was we brought this up during the podcast too. You specifically had it interwoven between Fox Harris getting a tumor being extracted. That's a quote unquote extracted from him, and screaming at the same time that you have Dawn Dunlap running down the hallway
with a mat knife. Don't forget.
Right.
But that was based on my experience in the Philippines, because I saw them do psychic surgeries where they
man, that is what it felt like
by hand, and they rip it out. It wasn't as big as what we had, but they would rip it out. When they wouldn't use a mat knife, they'd use this for hand.
So weird.
But if you look at the original cut, you'll see the screaming thing is much longer.
From what I was reading in your book, which is Celluloid Wars.
Lessons learned from the motion picture Forbidden World. For the first one, it's lessons learned from working on the motion picture about LLP Down the Stars. It's the same book divided in two, really.
Okay.
But one's on editing and one has the focus of editor, and the other has the focus of directing.
I love both of them, by the way.
Thank you.
I can't wait to see this in print. But you've mentioned also the aspect of comedy and horror, and how Roger does not do mixed genres.
That's correct.
Like that. How difficult was that to get your vision? Because the comedy does work. What comedy is in there, it does work. We did laugh. We laughed where we didn't want to laugh. Particularly in one of the first scenes. We'll get to that in a second. I want to hear what you have to say about this comedy.
When I was editing Crazy Mama, Roger had just produced Death Race 2000. Mm-hmm. And he only had the one editing room. And Tina Hirsch was cutting. Roger was forcing Paul Bartel to take a lot of the comedy out. And I watched him do it, and it was very painful.
Oh, yeah.
So I knew, comedy and horror was just starting by the time I was at Fruit. And I knew that, you can't possibly, you're in a closed space, and someone's going to get killed every 7 to 8 minutes. If you don't have some humor, you're a jerk. You got to provide some entertainment. It's like, it's so predictable that if you take it seriously, then you become really boring.
Right.
So it's like how to, and my humor, it's from the theater, so it's like, it goes to the absurd level, and I take things to the extreme, and so a lot of the comedy Roger wasn't aware of because it's in the script, but, it's like when a mutant pukes, and we found this pink stuff that freezes upon contact with air. It would burn the skin, but it's this pink gooey stuff that worked. And the first cut is the shock, the second cut is funny. And without the second shot, you're not free to laugh. It looks serious. But when you see it the second time, you're able to laugh. When Jesse Bain is sticking his hand in Cal's stomach to try to find the tumor, he goes here, and Cal goes, no, higher.
Yes.
Really get in there. Get up to the elbow in there.
Roger has a small screening room in his office, and it seats about 9. But I asked anyone in the actual room never to laugh. So so Roger didn't think it was funny.
Yeah, don't give it away.
All right. Yep.
Yeah, and then he did something I didn't anticipate. It was to have a snake, and that's where everything went off the rails.
Ah.
So it was at the theater in Culver City. It was a big theater, and this was before the multiplexes. It's at like 500, 400, and it was pretty full. They came to see a movie called Moving Violation, and Roger had in a small cardboard piece the word mutant, and it was really on a magic marker written on like a 6-inch by 12-inch piece of cardboard in the window. That's what's pretty annoying. Mutant tonight. So they suddenly saw this movie, and people were going nuts. They were laughing and screaming as much as I ever dreamed. I can't imagine seeing it at the theater. That must have been amazing. People were talking, like it was like, and this is before that became commonplace. Right. Rocky Horror Picture Show hadn't evolved yet. It was just. It was electric. It was just amazing. It was a theatrical experience, And Roger comes storming up the aisle, goes right by me, and there's a white guy, and he's got his legs up, and he yells at the screen, and Roger cold cocks him really hard. I mean, I heard it. I was like 10 feet away, and I heard it. And he points at him, shaking his finger, "Stop laughing. This is a serious sci-fi movie." And he's quiet, but the rest of the audience is still going wild. Roger went back to his seat, and he was actually afraid that the guy his friends were going to come after him. So he and his head of post kept moving around the different seats till the film was over. And he comes out, saying to me, "Alan, this is the worst sneak I've had in 26 years, but I know how to save it." And I said, "Save it? It was great." And he said, they're laughing at the movie. I said, and he was trying to teach me the difference between good comedy and bad comedy. And I said, "We got tremendous laughter. It was great. It was intended. We still pull off all the horror, too. It's working, Mm-hmm. And he had also title tested Mutant in 2 high schools, where he sent his women assistants to go to high school and say, "Would you see a movie called Forbidden World or Mutant?" And none of them knew what the word mutant meant. Of course, 6 months later, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comes out. Right, there it goes. But he said, "I'm changing the title of the movie, and I'm taking out all the places where people laugh, and be there tomorrow morning to make the cuts, or I'll have someone else do it." And all the young people who were working at New World, you could just watch them all agreeing with Roger, and I could see it because I was in their shoe. The way to prove yourself to Roger is to become the director. It's not that they were putting it down; they were agreeing with him from their point of view, but getting his approval. I don't think it was done maliciously. So I made the cut, and I was a skilled executioner. It didn't look like they were guys. And then we screened it again, and they were still laughing. And so I made more cuts. And then we screened it a third time, and that was in torrent. No one showed up during the day. And Roger let it out. By this time, it was 78 minutes. So I really couldn't cut much more out. But then I kept the original print.
Right.
And I took it out. I stole it. And then Roger found out that I had it.
Mm-hmm.
And he ran to the back, and I refused. He said, "I'm going to send the police out to get it." Jeez. And I said, "Well, how about if we donate it to UCLA Archives?" And he agreed to that. But the weird thing is that I couldn't screen it because it was that there was no negative to match that. That was the only way I could screen it was to make a negative from that positive print and then make another print, and that was exorbitant. So I was able to screen it until recently when Shout Entertainment was re-releasing Forbidden World on Blu-ray, and they the lab was CFI, which is a lab originating from the early days of film, around. And in fact, film people nicknamed CFI as can't find it. And so they didn't have any record of it until Shout got the library from Photochem, which had bought CFI, and they found it. They found the negative. It's actually, they found an inner positive. The negative was cut, but they were ready to make prints. And when you make prints from the negative, you make an inner positive, and that's good for about 100 prints.
Awesome.
So they'd already struck that, and they found it. So then they were able to re-release it.
That's awesome. The longer cut of Mutant, how much footage did you basically have to eliminate?
6 minutes.
6 minutes? Okay.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Also, there was the music change. And originally, Jimmy, when he cleans up the lab with the dead animals, he's doing it to Johann Strauss,
Mm-hmm.
And that became what the Mutant recognized later. So that got a huge laugh.
But in the movie, I wanted to ask you about this because I read it in your novel that you used 100 gallons of slime for Forbidden World.
Yeah. It's the main ingredient in toothpaste.
Okay.
It's methyl cellulose.
Minty.
And we got it in barrels from Long Beach.
Oh, wow. But from what it looks like on film, it looks a lot more. Did you end up having to reuse slime? And the special effects were just amazing.
Yeah, slime doesn't really age. It doesn't really rot.
That's one of the best qualities about it. It sticks around for a while.
Which made the set dangerous, you said, in the hallways because it's slippery, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're wearing a bathroom and no shoes.
Yeah. That's probably the worst. Yeah, that bathroom needed a good cleaning. They needed.
It was a painful job. It was not, pleasant at all. I was really depressed. But people saw it as like a cheap exploitation film, and I was suddenly lumped into all the others, and it just.
It was successful, wasn't it? I mean, it made money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I'm just saying, in terms of the industry,
right.
It wasn't something that I, as a filmmaker. It was like my agent. I switched agents. He was the same agent as the Coen brothers. And they said, if you were hipper, we could do something with you. And I said, well, I've got the original cut of Mutant. I'd like you to see that. And they said, oh, yeah. It was that different, It was being able to be wise about the genre.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And do something beyond it that used it in an interesting way.
Right.
So kind of my, brash attitude, whatever it was, it was compromised.
Right.
If you're not laughing during that whole screen fest, then you're looking at the operation seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And
that seems like such a depressing way to watch movies. I mean, it's going to be different to everybody, so it shouldn't be this solemn thing. You should be talking about it and laughing and
reveling in the moment.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's like when Tracy has the hand attached to her and then it falls off as she's screaming. That made a whole bit for that whole thing. It still scares her, but it's funny too. It's not like it takes you out of the movie.
No.
But you don't have to take it seriously. I mean, how can you take the whole film seriously to begin with?
Right.
It's just one absurd idea after the next.
Yeah.
So Roger came up with the most absurd idea, which I love, which was killing him with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't get the humor in that.
Right.
So like one great shot is the point of view from the mouth when the cancer's going in.
Yeah.
Right.
But Forbidden World really did become this cult classic sci-fi horror.
It took a while. It took a while. Believe me, it was not. Well, I mean, industry-wise, it didn't mean much to anyone. It became pretty interesting once cable started,
mm-hmm.
and that was a few years later. And then it played a lot, and that's when people started liking it.
I definitely saw it on cable back in the day.
And this box was constantly moving in and out of the video store. It was great. It was good times. The second Celluloid Wars, I know it's just in its infancy now and probably still growing to get that finalized. How long before you see that actually coming together?
the writing is finished.
Okay.
The publisher is creating the graphics to go around it, and the model for it has already been established with the London Battle. It's really just a month.
Awesome.
Once he finishes the first one, and the plan is to release it soon after.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Big time.
can't wait for that.
But the book is basically as written. I cleaned up grammar and took a couple things out, but it really is spontaneously, lightly diatribe.
Mm-hmm.
And that was written on a typewriter.
Oh.
So, I was pretty manic.
Your insight into, at the time, creating those journals, it was a great thing that you did, keeping all of this and a timeline of the events that followed. It reads great.
Oh, great.
So
happy.
So you went on to direct a few more movies, right?
Here's what happened after Forbidden Road, which is pretty interesting, that kind of heartbreaking too. Julia Phillips discovered me.
Okay.
And she declared me the next Scorsese Spielberg, because she had produced Taxi Driver and Close Encounters. And she attached me, and both she and Spielberg came out of Close Encounters with a mission to do a special effects movie about a childhood extraterrestrial.
Okay, yeah.
And she had this script that was written by a really good action writer called Ghost Town, that was about these Cub Scouts who were going on an enclave. They pass a ghost town, and the plane goes down.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids wind up without the pilot in this ghost town, and these ghosts are around. But it turns out that town 100 years before was invaded by extraterrestrials, and the townspeople try to kill them, and the extraterrestrials kill the townspeople, and they've been waiting for repairs from their planet to come before they can go back. And they keep reincarnating their leader in the body of a little boy.
Okay.
And so one of these boys transforms during this time when they're going through, but it turns out the extraterrestrials are playing ghost to get the ET from the boy, and he becomes an ET and goes back. We went around Hollywood with it, and she introduced me as the stuttering director. And TriStar said they wanted to do it. Sidney Pollack was their advisor, and he had to approve of me as a stuttering director, which he did. It was a great meeting. We didn't talk about stuttering at all. He said, how do you see the movie? And I showed him my chart. So I looked out. He was really impressed with that. And I wanted to do it from the boy's point of view. And, we were going to be the first film to use computerized special effects. Anyway, so that Julie was supposed to be off drugs, and she was, as far as I knew. But we went for a meeting and walked outside, and Julia was getting a cigarette from her pack, and she was pushing him out, asking for a budget raise from $12 million to $16 million.
Man.
This huge Rastafarian type roach falls out.
No.
And everyone pretends not to see it. And Walter Goldman goes back to the office and can't see the movie. And I spent a year and a half into it without being paid.
Yeah.
So I recut Final Terror, where Joe drove off because we had the same agent then. So then I really had to find a job, and Fred Weintraub, who had hired me for all the editing, he wanted me to direct Out Control.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where things really got bad.
Oh, no.
It was awful. It was the worst experience I've ever had.
Really? Oh, no.
Yeah.
Because I enjoyed the movie.
Oh, good. Well, first he said that I could change the writing, and I wanted to make it more like Lord of the Flies, more believable. And I didn't want the rape scene before, the love scene.
Right.
But then when we got there, when he threw it out, the original script, which was okay, and but John Alonso was shooting it, and before I left to go to Yugoslavia, it was before the war, I had a meeting with the the actors, and I taped it on videotape with my friend's Beta 1 camera. And I shot lots of different two shots as they were just hanging out and having a picnic. And I gave it to John to see all the different two shots with the kids. And he, turns out, was really insulted. He thought I was telling him how to shoot a two shot.
Oh.
And that wasn't the point. I was trying to get him to be excited by what they look like.
Mm-hmm.
And the editor, and he looked at Forbidden World and just laughed at it, not with it, and said it was a piece of junk. And John's intention was to take over the movie when we were there.
Gotcha.
And he set me up on the first day, so I was such a sucker. The first day is when they all arrived at the island after being, crashing in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And we're shooting in the winter. We're only a couple of hours away from Sarajevo for the Winter Olympics. And so I couldn't get the kids wet. So how do you do that? So anyway, he, had them in different parts of the rocks once they came on. And John said, why not have a camera on each of them and just keep rolling? The film's cheap, better than mine. So I said, really? He said, yeah, there's plenty, don't worry. So I did that. And of course, the next day, Fred freaked out. How can you spend so much money on this and that? And we had our first, so I knew that John, set me up to be the inexperienced director. And the last time that they worked together, he took over and directed. And I just got married and not wanting to lose a job, and I needed the job. And and they needed me because I was the only one who knew what was required the next day. But I wanted it to be handheld. This is when MTV first started, and I wanted to go around with the kids and make it like a real youthful action thing. And John was a great hand holder, but he didn't want to move. So he restaged all the action to come to him and move away. And I was stuck. I tried to change that and said, he's the master. I just did my best. But then Fred wouldn't let me in the editing room. And I hated the way the movie was first cut. It was too slow. And but I was brought back to work with the actors on ADR. Mm-hmm. And the sound editor was this older guy who kept saying, I can slide it. I said, nowhere near. And then the next day, it turns out that sound editor went in for glaucoma surgery.
Oh,
so he couldn't see anything in sync. And then I had to come in and sync the sync problem, which couldn't really be fixed, but I had to do my best. And I was cutting it on the second floor all night, and I had to go out for 7D. This was in Hollywood. And I realized that I locked myself out, and I couldn't get back in. And we were doing the mixing next day, but there were these iron bars outside with spikes on them, and I was going on the second floor, and I left the window open. So I climbed up on the spikes and got to the top, and then slipped, and the spike went right through my pants, and I was hanging with the spike, and the policeman comes by. And I go, I'm the director, okay?
Sure you are, kid. Yeah. I'm your head actor,
wow.
too. Right?
Yeah.
That actually happened to me with Mutant, because the Forbidden World up in New York, I went there, and that time Richmond High was open at the same time. School with Amy at AFI, and heckling, and she had posters everywhere, so I put up my flyers on top of her posters, and the police arrested me. And I said, I went to school with her. Her posters are up. And they said, yeah, they get put up by kids during the night. You're an adult during the day, and that's illegal. And they didn't believe I was the director anyway. So then, luckily, Susan had just gotten New York Post, and I had a review in the New York Post, and was bringing it to me, and I could show them my name, and they saw that I was the director, and they let me go. So it made page 6. And I showed the movie, and it didn't have the same, guts that Forbidden World did. And then New World was wrestling had just started, and the person who was a special effects assistant editor on Reading was running post, and he had produced an editing documentary on wrestling. I think it's called I Just Want to Hurt People. And I could come up with an idea for a wrestling movie, and the head of New World had money for a wrestling movie. James Robinson was just starting his company. And so I'm a real Japanese samurai buff. So not buff, but I watched every movie I could. And there was one plot that I thought would be great, which was from Boyokin, which was the samurai warrior drops out when the master is doing evil. And then when he does it again years later, he comes out to stop him.
Gotcha, yeah.
Because once you go against the master, you can't be a samurai anymore. And when it's hiding, it comes out to destroy it. So that's what I did with that plot for wrestling. The wrestler decapitates someone in the ring.
Yes.
He had to go into hiding after that. And then when someone comes out, the masked wrestler pretending to be him and decapitating someone in the ring for the battle royale, he comes out to stop him. That's where that plot came from.
Did you pump up the campiness in that?
Yeah, we were trying to be Spinal Tap, you know, and which is really funny. So we were definitely trying to. I mean, we hired a comic troupe from San Francisco. I thought it would be a huge hit. It wasn't at all. Well, New World hated it because they wanted more action, and there was 13 bouts in it, but they didn't want the comedy. They didn't get it, but they wanted to take advantage of the sports of wrestling, and they put it out without the film drop out in the Southeast. So they made 300 print and put it out there, and there was a tornado. In San Antonio, there was a billboard that just had Grun left on it. Everything had been blown away. So no one came, and they just said it's just going to go out of the sports video. And I begged them for a one theater LA opening, which they gave me, just so it could get reviewed. The person that produced the trailer was a Saturday Night Live writer, and he got the movie really well. And he said Andy would love this, Andy Warhol. And he got it to Andy, who did love it. And he wanted to open it in New York with Cyndi Lauper.
Awesome.
For rock and roll and wrestling. But New World said they can't make a penny on that. But it's in the Andy Warhol Museum.
Okay.
I staged a live wrestling event outside the theater and filled the theater, got pick of the week in LA Weekly, and that was it. They released it as a DVD a couple of years ago. Finally.
So you went on to film a few more movies here. I watched Program to Kill. And
now, how many directors do you think?
I see you're there with one other on IMDb credit, but tell me what happened with that.
There are actually two different movies.
Okay.
Both incomplete. Both shot full scripts that had a similar cast but different circumstances, so they were pretty much incompatible. I mean, Sandra Bergman played the same type role, but a different interpretation. One, she was a rock star. The other one, she was more of a guerrilla fighter.
Okay.
So it got two different types of
well, that still works.
Yeah.
I mean, I was showing Grunt around trying to get my next job. It took a year of showing it around. And then one of the executives of Transworld that was in the Israeli company, he liked the movie and said, we need you to save our movie. He wanted me to take 20 minutes from each of those two movies and do a new 45.
Oh.
And so that's why I gave her the video so I could take the footage in Israel and colorize it, make it acceptable. And all the people from both movies could watch what she was watching. And then I had her kill everybody. And then have a battle in the end.
So really then coming together with Program to Kill, though, that you had to jump through some hoops to actually get that into a feasible movie?
Well, there was another problem after that. Once it was done, they wouldn't let me show it for a year. And this is before videotape, so I couldn't show it. So then because they didn't want my saying that there was more than one director on this. They had problems. It was their first movie, and they wanted it to be legit. They could actually produce the movie, and they had, I think, a 20 film slate. Ultimately, they were trying to get past for 10 years of making movies or whatever. But they said they wanted to make another movie with me, and I brought them Paul Barkel's Frankencar.
All right.
Which was really great. And I don't know if you those progressive commercials you're seeing now with the car. It was like that, only with a sports car, a racing car. The guy was
sounds insane.
Because he was a race car driver and crashed, and his father, who's a car inventor and robotics guy, was able to save his son, but make him part of the car. And then the son takes out revenge, and everybody had to love it for it. It's a brilliant script. And they were going to do it, but Paul wanted $150,000, and Transworld only offered $100,000, and he actually said no to it. And I just couldn't believe it. But the distributor of that movie started his own film company, and he saw me cutting trailers a year later and said, "Why aren't you directing?" I said, "You tell me." And so I said, "Well, if you have anything, I'd like to do it." I had the script Phone Sex, and that became Intimate Stranger with Deborah Harry.
I really enjoyed that. I think Deborah Harry as a phone sex operator, for one, I'm sold.
Yeah.
I had trouble with James Russo, though. I originally met him with my first agent. He was part of that New York crowd. Harry Upton was my first agent who represented Scorsese and Ridley Scott, Harvey Keitel. But he turned on me right away. And he thought I reported him for blowing takes before lunch, that he get paid extra. I was glad someone else did it, but I didn't report him. Anyway, and he didn't want to kiss Deborah. He didn't want to be sexually. Didn't want to have a compromise thing with the sister. He refused to look at her. At one point, I actually had to walk off the set unless he listened to what I was asking for.
Man,
and it's really hard also not to be able to edit my own stuff. The editor who was really good, and I loved her editing with me, but she didn't want to make jump cuts. Yeah. And I had to make jump cuts for the action in the hallway for a fight scene. So I wish I had a time where I didn't have to have this problem, I had that problem, but there were always problems that I could have been better. And I'm reading Frank Capra now. That's part of the Art of Directing series. But I'm reading his book, Name Above the Title. He was the biggest on that. He said you can't make a good movie unless you can control it. I don't want to sound like a complainer or someone who makes excuses, but I really tried hard after Intimate Stranger to control the script. I wouldn't do a movie unless I could control the script, and I haven't been able to do a movie.
No.
And I've kept trying. And anytime I was going into a deal and it looked like I would lose control of the script, I walked away. Just didn't want to have that happen again. But the good news is that I discovered documentaries.
Where you could. That was one of my questions I wanted to ask you is taking on the different roles as now a director. Did you have the same feelings towards your editor? Did you feel like you needed to be in there and supervising every cut, or did you want to just so you could have your hands on the product?
I don't think supervising an edit really works because you have to communicate every thought, and it takes too long. By the time you're finished communicating it, you may be thinking of something else, and you can't get someone to change that, and not do that, and change something else. And if you're talking to someone else, they get frustrated, especially if you're on a tight schedule. But if you're doing it yourself, then you don't mind changing your mind. I kind of grew up on the New York style of editing, which is on a moviola that has arms, and so you can't go forward and back really fast. And so you have to make your decisions from the first viewing and mark and pull all those things and assemble it together and see what you got. And it's usually that doesn't really work, but some things work. But then you can start playing and experimenting.
Right.
And a scene can work just as well why start with an establishing shot? Use it as a reveal. Don't start with a wide shot. And you don't know that until you've experimented with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so to communicate that and sit in the room, once you have an editor who's willing to do that and wanting to do that and wanting to work, 8 hours of overtime in a day, to do it, it's hard to find that.
Yeah.
But if it's your own work, you'll do it. Forbidden World was the last time in a movie that I really had control of it until I didn't have control at all.
Mm.
But that really represents me the best way. Ideas like having Deborah Harry, be a flamethrower and fighter and all that kind of stuff. Well, that was great. It's still, I think, more of the heart of something,
Mm-hmm.
working and experimenting with it.
Well, see, I have one big question. Now, this is an off-the-wall question, but that's how I come out sometimes about Intimate Stranger here. Okay, you got Tim Thomerson, who is the quintessential stalker killer,
Yeah.
who has just killed Grace Zabriskie. And he sits down at the table, at this little coffee table, and he's making a sandwich, and he's cutting the crusts off of the sandwich. And when I look at the sandwich, I'm like, what the hell was in that sandwich?
I don't know.
I wanted to know what was in that sandwich. It looked like peanut butter jelly and mayonnaise, and I didn't want to believe that's what it was.
that was his idea to cut off the crust, which I love.
Very interesting. And then I wanted to know, was that the same knife that he just killed Grace Zabriskie with?
I love working with her. I thought she was so fantastic.
Oh yeah, she is great.
The scene in the bookstore was really fantastic.
Mm-hmm. But it was creepy. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun.
Okay.
These are right up my alley, though. I mean, this is where we get our bread and butter right here. But moving on to what you're doing currently, doing the tributes, the directing tributes, they're awesome. They're very good.
Thank you.
Now, what got you into doing this?
Well, I was really big on the art of editing. And so when I joined American Cinema Editors, I created this event called Invisible Artists. The Academy Award nominees were all in town the day before the award. So we had an event at the American Cinematheque with no admission fee, with editors coming in to discuss their process of editing. And I wanted to make it so that you didn't have to watch the movies to appreciate what they were talking about, because you weren't trying to psychoanalyze the movie. You were just trying to see what challenges they had, and I could intercut the clips with them in making documentaries with them. And I thought it was a really great thing for film education. Mm-hmm. And I started to teach at USC around that time. So I used the films to teach with and to show the school and all that. And I received a lot of resistance from American cinema editors, believe it or not. Okay. Because they were producing their own documentary on editing that actually other people were producing, but they were involved in, aesthetically and organizing it, and Ace had a share in it and all of that. And that was called the Cutting Edge. They let me make films of it, but I couldn't do anything with them. It was a real political mess. Mm-hmm. And the next thing I did to try to find something that I thought could be independent of that was to do Editing 24.
Okay.
I actually did an event with Ace where I interviewed all the older editors and to pay tribute to them and made that short film movie on. I actually wanted to do a documentary about them because they were the editors who were the first assistant editors in film. And then by the time they did their 8 years in the union to then become editors, the editors hadn't died. Then TV came in and they became the first great editors of TV. I love Lucy and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So then they wouldn't let me make a documentary because they wanted their film to have a complete playing field. Mm-hmm. And the outgoing president, Mark Goldblatt, who was the editor on Noise from the Deep way back, right, said, "I can't believe we haven't had a single movie about editing, and now we can't have two. Right. It had to be them." So I fell in love with the idea of being a filmmaker with archives because you didn't have to spend money on shooting anything. Mm-hmm. I loved the idea of directing and what directors did, and I was a student at AFI, and the biggest learning element there were their Harold Lloyd Master seminars, and every couple of months a master filmmaker would come in, and you would spend 2 weeks watching all their work and then being in a living room with just them and no moderator. And some of them were recorded. And so I called and asked if anything from those days survived. And they said, we have a few things, but they're in terrible shape. You don't want them. And I bugged them up for them, but they said, take whatever you want.
Oh.
And so
Right.
there in a closet was Hitchcock, Spielberg, Truffaut, Catholic, Houston, and Lincoln.
Awesome.
Wow.
And restored them as much as I could. And the first film I made was with Hitchcock and Spielberg, a 30-minute movie. And I made one on Truffaut. And I had a screening at SC, and no one came. And one student, in fact, asked me, oh, you made a documentary about the Canadian Prime Minister? So, so then I put Truffaut and Hitchcock and Spielberg together, and that's why that one is like that. Then it was just a mission. You come up with an idea and you're stuck with it. So it was a long idea, and it took a lot of involvement, and it kept me as a filmmaker. I could, it gave me the emotional experience and creative stimulation to feel like I was directing a movie. I still had to get the emotion of the movie out, and I was doing it with Masterworks. And so the whole idea of visualizing without a narrator and making the editor the writer is, a great pursuit of mine, and I could fulfill it with that work.
I was going to mention that as well. Your ability in your documentaries to tell an entire story without having narration is remarkable. I loved it.
Well, thank you. Inventing a job. I hate to jinx myself, but there's always someone who's desperate, who, is over their head and they need help.
Mm-hmm.
And my remedy is always the same, pick up the narrator and make it about the characters, and through the characters you tell the story, which is how films are made,
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely takes time. And that's what people don't like, because you have to mold what people say to keep the interest.
Mm-hmm.
And you basically have to do a dialogue cut first before you visualize anything. And then you see how many cuts you have, and then you've got to cover all that,
Yep.
If you pick up the narrator, then it's a dialogue-driven piece. And I found that music really plays as a narrative guide that lets you know how to feel and think. And I discovered with the Native Americans that if you have melody and rhythm, you can express tragedy in a really beautiful way that does honor to both the story and the storytelling.
This is where you garnered some real important awards in your time. Talk to me about the Survivors of the Holocaust. That's where you won 2 Emmys and a Peabody. Am I correct on that?
Yes. And then I couldn't get hired after that. Honestly, I had too many awards, and I didn't want a narrator. So how do you approve a script? How do you approve a budget? My whole thing was give me an archive, and I can make a story. And even though I proved it, you can't budget that. It just set me on a path where I just had to make my own movies and pay for it with my editing work. And so that I used archive. Like my next movie after that was an independent project where I took a play and turned it into a documentary. So it was both a drama and a documentary. That was Old Man River.
Yes.
And that won a lot of film festivals, but didn't get picked up for any national distribution, because they said it fell between the cracks. It didn't have a star, and it was both a documentary, and this was before the term hybrid is now being used. And, but it didn't get picked up by anyone.
But then you came back with My Maryland. I really enjoyed that one as well. Was that totally your project?
Yes. I actually wanted to do a tribute to Kennedy.
Okay.
For the 40th anniversary of his death. And I didn't want to pay any rights for any of the footage. And he was on so many collectibles, and that's free to use, like plates and salt and pepper shakers, all that kind of stuff. So, and I really wanted to explore the love affair with Marilyn.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only one picture of them, but I could put them together in a collectible afterlife, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then a person who was renting a room from me, I had my own place to edit because, you know, when I did get editing offers to do once the computer came in, I didn't want to work without the Windows. In fact, I wouldn't work without Windows. Mm-hmm. And so every editing room had no Windows. And I got hired for multi-screen theme park editing. And so that became a really good source of income. And then I could produce my own documentaries with that. So that's how I could do my Marilyn. And the person who was renting a room for me said, you know, that if I needed collectibles on Marilyn, his fiance knew Marilyn's hairdresser, who's quite obese and is not going to live much longer and wants to tell everything. And he has collectibles. So that's what kind of started it.
Yeah.
And then he introduced me to the Marilyn Remembered Fan Club. And that's the longest meeting fan club in history. At that time, they were meeting for 30-some years. And each person had a personal story. So, and she was a stutterer, and she had been molested. And since I identified with both of those items, I felt that, you know, I had a calling to do that. And she's quite interesting to spend time with.
Oh, yeah. Do you find it difficult to get some of the archives?
Well, then I just stole stuff. You know,
right.
I just took it. I mean, I just took her movies and stills and, you know, whatever I could. There were a couple of photographers whose work you couldn't touch, but generally, you know, fair use is out there so you can, you know, if you're talking about it, you can show it. You know, and so much is newsreel footage too. Mm-hmm. What I ran into, I didn't expect, was that there were like 4 other documentaries about her at the same time. Because it was the 40th anniversary of her death. So,
gotcha.
you know, I also made a movie about Jean Benet as well. Mm-hmm. That kind of liberated me as a filmmaker in terms of documentary. Because for that, when I was shooting off the screen and getting kind of footage that was not decayed, but
like just degraded.
Yes, that's it. You know, it became art. You know, and edited within an edit. You know, that I was shooting stuff in the editing room, moving stuff on the monitor, and multi-screening stuff. It was an obsession. But what really got me was the Shelton Leonard one. I love the Mary Tyler Moore show, and I grew up with the Danny Thomas show, but I wasn't crazy about TV necessarily. And but then I called the TV Academy, and the person who was a supervisor of or helped with the finishing on Survivors of the Holocaust, he had started their archive in the same way that Spielberg did his archive. Mm-hmm. So I asked them if they had interviewed Sheldon. They had only done 6, and Sheldon was the 6th. And I asked if I could see them. I thought if I could, you know, make a movie based on his interview with Alan Narrator, I would do it. And as the TV Academy, as they kept interviewing people in his life, like Mary Tyler Moore and Carl Reiner and Andy Griffith, they would give me the interviews, and I would update it. It took about 10 years to make that one finish. But no one was interested in it. Students weren't even interested in it. Teachers weren't even interested in it. But that's what got me into the art of directing, because from Sheldon, he was a director, producer, writer. That's what convinced me I could make movies with. I showed you that the movie that I have is art of directing, the final episode, and that was I worked with directors that weren't with that archive.
Okay.
Part of that was work I did for the Motion Picture Academy for the museum. That's where the opening is with the legendary directors. And some of that I took from our art of directing, but it didn't work for them because people stopped and watched it. So they had to have traffic move through. My main concern right now is updating my documentary cut for the last 10 years, which would incorporate some of that work. I started a movie with a friend of mine in education whose brother invented the chip, and he died last year. And she's we're trying to get to Wozniak to. He's talked about him as the father of the personal computer, and so we interviewed one person who worked with him, and we did it remotely by sending him the latest iPhone that could shoot 4K and a lighting setup and a microphone setup, and interviewed. I was on Zoom, but the interview itself was set up with the eyeline as if I were there as the director, and that worked pretty well. I want to write my story, so my memoir, and it kind of has a Forrest Gump type feeling to it, or Zoe feeling to it. I kind of appear at different places with all these people who you know about but don't necessarily know about me.
Yes.
And they're all kind of funny. I've written the first chapter, which is 50 pages long.
Wow.
It's all about stuttering, too. It took a while, but it's funny. There's a lot that I feel I can communicate with that as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's stuttering. So, and I'm really excited about these two books, and I feel if I can follow it with my autobiography, that'll be...
that'd be big.
I got connected to this person who was a producer who was wanting to hire me to direct a documentary about DACA that went on. That was a couple of years ago, and he came up with every excuse that you could ever imagine, and it got to be so absurd about his having money that I kept track of all of it because I thought it would make a really, story. It starts off with my grandfather's in the hospital and my grandmother's in the hospital. I go on from there, and I've heard everything. So, but he recommended me to these people who had shot this African American director, cameraman, and this producer wanted to do the DACA one. They call me and they have a 5-minute reel that they've done of these documents work with these people who are obese. And it's, curing them through changing their lifestyle and eating habits and giving them exercise. And I really liked what they were doing. And it was this one about this 13-year-old boy who so I said they should structure around him and not have a narrator. And then I kind of worked through it with him, editing while they were shooting and following the story. It became a really compelling thing, and especially with COVID, half the people who have died are obese. So, and that's not really been talked about that much. And also half of the adults are obese in this country. So it's mostly through processed food and lack of exercise, bad eating habits. So, and the movie's become, I just finished it just to deliver the final 4K two days ago.
Oh, wow.
And so it's called Blob Blob Fish. And there's probably going to be a sequel that I'll be involved with. So it's good to have, work during this time. There was a movie that I was about to direct before COVID hit, which was basically Airbnb gone way wrong.
Okay.
And it's called Fugitive in My Bed. It was really a good thriller. We had Chinese money that we were the Chinese producer to shoot in Alberta, and we had the distributor lined up who was going to be the distributor of Bad Day, the movie I tried to make for 12 years, and still keep trying to make it. Because of the low-budget filmmaking, I thought if you could shoot 3 low-budget movies in a row, back to back, you could have a budget for a regular movie. So I came up with this concept called Cut, which is film students doing a horror movie on a 48-hour race in one building. And then the next one is 5 years later, they come in and they unearth the building and they want to devote themselves to finishing the movies that the students who died were making. And their egos take over and then they start making their own movies and they all die. And then the third one is these three women are editors, and they find footage that's never been put together, and they want to make their own movie. So I thought they could all be shot back to back to back, and
I like it. That's a good concept.
I don't know. I can't tell my friends or my family this, because they said, you forget about directing, take a hint. But, I still feel like I want to make my second movie, which is weird.
Yeah.
Like for Dhaka, I came up with an idea called Dhaka the musical, which is based on 6 characters in search of an author, which is a pure and double play that I acted in, where this family can't solve their own problems, so they go into a theater and ask the theater people if they can act out their problem, and they don't believe the theater people, so then they take the stage and they act it out. I thought that was a good basis for a musical.
Yeah,
very interesting. Yeah,
and my wife's writing a musical based on a film that I had, a screenplay that I had optioned, right after Mutant.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came up with the idea to turn into a musical 12 years ago, and I'm still writing it. It's a science fiction, alien abduction, musical, comedy love story.
Awesome. You've got it all in there.
All the things I like.
And then my younger daughter, who has had a band for several years, and she's coming out with her first album, so I'm doing videos.
Awesome.
I've been doing videos over the years of that, kind of real homemade.
What's the band?
Starving Darling.
Of Starving Darling.
She's on Spotify, Vimeo, and YouTube.
Awesome.
The video I'm working on now is called Hot Pink. And her big hit one, I think, is Match in the Dark.
Awesome. It's probably hard for her to grow up within a family where you've got a director, editor, and a musical talent. She had to be an artist at some point, right? It was in her blood.
I mean, I think having a mother who has all the musical chops possible, including singing and all of that, was the biggest influence. She doesn't care too much about film. She can't watch film, really, because it's too real for her. She doesn't like it.
Awesome. Hey, Allan, we've had a great time.
But I never answered about the tail. You were asking about the tail in Mutant.
Yes.
The story about when I had to get June to lie on it.
Okay.
And it already had come through her back, but I had to sell the idea that what actually happened,
Okay. Yes.
And we had this overhead shot, which took hours to set up. It was a major thing because it went over. It was the kind of thing that revealed 3 sets from the top. It was an alienating effect, but it was like a master shot, for the whole, like the production shot. And so I was paying off the climax of the movie with this great shot. Mm-hmm. But where did the tail go? And it had to be that it went through her, and she didn't want that.
But did you explain that to her beforehand?
I did. I did not. I knew she knew. I knew if I did, I'd be in trouble. I was awful. I had to get the shot, but I knew that she could scream. And she had enough personal pain to relate to it on a very major level. I thought her scream was just the most frightening thing I've ever heard. It was just wow. But so she called her agent in, and I insisted that she do the shot. And then her agent came in to look at the shot, and he said, "It's a really good shot. What's the matter?" So that was okay. But I had to, I knew what I wanted, and it was tough to get, and it was exploitive, and I had to do it.
Well, I'm sure that Roger would have backed you up totally on that as well.
I would not ask Roger for anything. No, I didn't want to be beholden to him for anything. I didn't want. He would probably say, "Go without it."
Mm-hmm.
Really, because he wouldn't. With Roger, it's not the film first; it's the budget first and time.
Gotcha.
So he did give me 2 extra days because he really liked the movie. I mean, Roger loved the movie. He thought it was fantastic. I mean, he came to the editing room and just he said, "I'm going to make 4 4-frame trims just to cut something."
Mm-hmm.
It was that kind of. It was a beautiful thing. And then he freaked out at the opening.
he normally a violent man? I can't imagine him.
No.
I can't imagine him punching somebody.
Well, the best thing is that he goes outside after the fight. He goes away, and the guy who he punched comes out carrying a large Coke and throws it at him, hits him square in the back. Roger turns with his fist raised, sees that the guy's bigger than he is, and goes, "No, we're even," and he walks away.
Call it a draw.
That's awesome.
Well, you guys are great, and I tell you, I had the best time listening to you make fun of my movie. It was great.
Well, thank you. Retroactive approval here.
I've heard a lot over the years.
I'm sure.
Oh, it's a masterpiece.
Yes. We appreciate your time. You've been a great host. I will say your filmography needs to be celebrated. So I'm going to reach out to our listeners saying, hey, go check out these movies.
Yeah, for sure.
You can find many of them on YouTube, Tubi, for free. Get out and enjoy these.
And it's also okay to pass out the passwords too.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, I don't mind that. Cool. Yeah.
All right.
I would like people to see it. Yeah.
I appreciate everything. If you have anything else you want to plug right here, I was going to ask if Susan though had some intro music that I could put in for you. You know,
Of course,
your own theme music.
Do you have the music for Forbidden World?
Oh, I'm sure I could get that easy.
They've released it in LPs twice, or three
Awesome.
times. The last one came out in blue, white, and one other color.
Awesome.
But there's just one other quick story with that is that the most awkward time I've ever had is telling James Horner, "No, I don't want you to score my movie. I want my wife."
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, sorry, James, but
awkward.
hit the road.
But I love his music. It just wasn't. I wanted a new wave score. You know.
Yeah. And you succeeded. All right, Allan, again, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Right.
This was delightful.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Well, that wraps up 2020 in a big way. We would like to thank Allan again for his time. Look for his 2 books to be hitting the shelf soon. Celluloid Wars, Lessons Learned from the Making of the Movie Battle Beyond the Stars, and Celluloid Wars, Lessons Learned from the Making of Forbidden World. You can find more information on him at allanholzman.com. Well, Happy New Year from the Moratorium. We look forward to many more laughs in the years to come. If you have any movie suggestions, or just want to tell us how much we really suck, you can contact us at moviemoratorium@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and long live VHS.
And he said, "Allan, I don't know where you plan to go to from here or what you plan to do, but I want you to remember one thing. When a man fucks, he takes his pants off."
Oh, wait, I'm taking notes here.
Let me get that
Take
down.
pants off. Got it.